So 2025 is almost over, and I think it's safe to say that this has been one of the best years in gaming in a long time. From action RPGs to first-person shooters to indie titles to Metrovanias to RPGs and much, much more, this year has genuinely had something for everyone. So today, I figured let's go back through 2025 and pick out some of my favorite games that have been released this year. Before we begin, if you like this type of content, make sure to hit that like button and please consider subscribing if you want to see more content like this. We have reached the milestone of 1,000 subscribers. Thank you guys so much for all your love and support throughout this year that I've been making YouTube videos. Again, now the goal is to go to 2,000 subscribers and 3,000 and so on and so forth. So clicking that subscribe button really does help me out. Now back to the video. So in my opinion, there are three categories that make a game a game: the world, the gameplay, and the story. For each of these categories, I'll give 2 to 3 games that I think truly excelled in that area. After that, I'll talk about some games that I think are just straight up damn fun. These are games that don't really fit that single player RPG category with having a story and a traditional world. And then we'll follow up with some big ones with Bust of the Year and, in my opinion, Game of the Year. Starting with the world, when you talk about a good game world, there are many aspects that people take into consideration when trying to decide if a game world is good. The game needs to be detailed, beautiful, packed with great points of interest, be fun to explore, and so much more. Because of this, I think this is one of the categories that is traditionally more objective. I think gamers in general and the gaming community as a whole know what makes a good game world and what doesn't. I think it's easy to pick out a game world that you know is going to be incredibly good versus one that you know is incredibly generic and lacks anything exciting. Through this criteria, there are 3 games that I think fully meet this criteria and are some of the best game worlds of 2025. The first one is, of course, Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. Now, I've talked about this game till death. I reviewed it in its entirety when it first came out, and I also reviewed the last 2 DLCs for KCD2, and I still truly think this is one of the best game worlds I've ever been in. I mentioned this in my review, but Bohemia isn't immersive and beautiful because of massive mountains and picturesque valleys. Bohemia is immersive and beautiful because of the insane attention to detail and the simplicity of the game world. Bohemia is mostly forests and grass, and yet it is still strikingly beautiful and realistic. The main town, Gutenberg, isn't the biggest town ever in a game world, but it still feels like it's one of the most accurate I've ever seen. From the hustle and bustle of people going to their jobs, to the market with vendors calling out their wares and sellers shopping, to the various taverns filled with people eating and drinking, everything about this game is immersive, realistic, detailed, and packed with love. The second game, and a game that is kind of a complete 360 from KCD2, but still a game with an incredible world, is Ghost of Yotei. Now, every reason why Ghost of Yotei's world is so great are kind of the exact opposite reasons why KCD2's world is great. Ghost of Yotei forgoes some realism to stylize and make the most idyllic version of the Ezo region in Japan as possible. This manifests itself in stunning vistas, beautiful foliage and colors, and moments of quiet reflection as you traverse through Ezo. Couple this with one of the best in-game navigation / exploration systems I've ever seen with the guiding wind, it's a no-brainer that this is one of the best game worlds to have come out in 2025. I think an obvious point of criticism that's going to be thrown out there is that Ghost of Yotei doesn't really do much to innovate on the game world from Ghost of Tsushima, and that would be correct. There's nothing that Ezo does in Ghost of Yotei that hadn't already been done 5 years earlier in Tsushima, but Ghost of Yotei has damn near perfected the open world formula in 2020, so there just wasn't straight up much to iterate on with Ghost of Yotei. Even if Ezo is a new coat of paint over Tsushima, it is still one of the best game worlds in the past 5 years and should be commended as such. The last game we're talking about for this category is Dying Light: The Beast. Now, this is a game that I think does a fantastic job of blending everything that I've talked about with KCD2 and Ghost of Yotei into one game. It doesn't do these aspects as well as the other two games, but it does create a harmony between them that I think works really well. Castor Woods is beautiful during the day. It feels realistic with realistic lighting and shadows, and the interior spaces like the apartments, churches, and shops have phenomenal environmental storytelling with showing what a decrepit Eastern European town would look like during a zombie apocalypse. Couple this with an absolutely terrifying nighttime and phenomenal audio design, this truly does make for an incredibly immersive game. Add on the verticality with the parkour system, and you can get those moments where you take in beautiful sunrises over the city, just like you would in a game like Ghost of Yotei. Dying Light the Beast is definitely a game worth checking out for its world alone. Moving on to gameplay, again, there's tons of different types of gameplay, from first person to third person to RPGs to shooters to hack and slash to Souls-like games. There's a lot of different styles of gameplay, and quantifying and trying to compare those different styles can be a bit of a challenge. However, my criteria is that the game excels at the concepts and systems that the developer set out to accomplish, and thus is worthy of being considered one of the best games in terms of gameplay. Again, there are 3 games that I think really do accomplish a lot on the gameplay front. The first one is Borderlands 4. Now, don't get me wrong, this game had its fair share of issues, whether it was performance problems or Randy Pitchford's dumb comments. It wasn't easy to like this game due to the external factors surrounding it. But I do think it's unfair to discredit a lot of the hard work and time that Gearbox's developers put in to make Borderlands 4 gameplay the best in the franchise. The first-person shooting is fun and punchy, the encounter design is chaotic, but still incredibly fun and rewarding, and your Vault Hunter's special abilities add to the feeling of godlike power that I think Borderlands 4 excels at throughout its runtime. On top of all that, I think the loot system in this looter shooter is done phenomenally well. Finding those rare and unique weapons, the crazy and wacky things they do, and tailoring your arsenal to have real synergy based on not only the gun manufacturer, but also the attachment manufacturers allows for some pretty unprecedented amount of freedom on how you want to approach any one encounter in the Borderlands franchise. Overall, I had a blast playing through Borderlands 4, and the gameplay was the primary driver of that fun. Moving on and sticking with the first-person shooter vibes, we have The Outer Worlds 2. Now, for my money, I truly do think The Outer Worlds 2 has the best first-person shooter RPG mechanics since Cyberpunk 2077. Granted, there are not many first-person big-budget RPGs out on the market right now, but I truly do think The Outer Worlds 2 excels in this regard. Whether it's the incredibly fun-to-use and varied weapons, the incredible and dynamic flaw system, or the build crafting with the various mods and attachments, The Outer Worlds 2 kept me hooked from start to finish. The added replayability with the incredibly deep RPG skill system with the flaw system allows for multiple replays of this game without ever feeling like you're playing the same character twice. And I truly do think that this is the most fun I've had in a first-person shooter RPG since Cyberpunk 2077. Does it top Cyberpunk? No, I don't think so, but it's hard to top one of the greatest games of all time. The last game on this list, and the one that surprised me the most when I first played it, is Clair Obscur Expedition 33. Now, I mentioned this in my review, but I had never played a turn-based JRPG aside from Pokemon before Expedition 33, and it blew my mind how good the gameplay was. Each character you use is completely different than your others, with different abilities and completely different mechanics to learn and master. The Picto system, while overwhelming to learn at first, provides incredible versatility on how you want your characters to build out, and the enemies and bosses in this game are pretty difficult, making you learn their movesets and their tells, similar to Souls-like games. For my first dive into turn-based JRPGs, Expedition 33 turned out to be one of the best I could have ever tried, and it stays true as one of my favorite gameplay experiences of 2025, and even more so, one of my favorite gameplay experiences of all time. The last aspect that I want to talk about when it comes to the 3 aspects is, of course, the story. Now, to me, the story is by far one of the most subjective pieces of a game out there. One person may find a story completely horrible because the characters and their motivations are completely unrelatable to them. However, another person may find that same story and those same characters incredibly amazing because they are relatable to them. Because of this, there's a lot of subjectivity that goes into deciding whether or not a story is good. However, there are certain aspects of a story that I do think can be universally agreed on. Things like, do the characters have depth? Is the dialogue genuine? Do the characters' decisions make sense given the arcs that they are currently on? These questions oftentimes can be universally agreed upon, even if the actual interest or quality of the story cannot. That being said, there are once again 3 games that I truly think have incredible stories. The first one, without a doubt, is Expedition 33. In my review, I called it the greatest story I had ever experienced in a video game, and 7 months later, I can absolutely stand by my statement. The performances from the actors of Gustav, Mael, and the rest of the supporting cast is exceptional. The dialogue is some of the most realistic dialogue I've ever experienced in a video game, and the story itself, the premise, the twists and turns, and that ending, man, is simply put phenomenal. There are a few games out there that have invoked genuine emotion from me during certain scenes and moments. This game invoked those emotions in me within the first 30 minutes of the damn game. I should have known in that moment that I was about to experience one of the best rides of my life, but man, I am so glad I gave this game a chance. The story alone makes this game worth playing because it is that unique and that packed with amazing moments. The next game on this list is Outer Worlds 2. Once again, I think this is Obsidian firing on all cylinders for the story. The Outer Worlds 2 has an incredibly dynamic story with tons of meaningful choices, dialogue options, and consequences. Deciding on which faction to side with, Anti's choice or the Order, or deciding to try and solicit the help of both factions and seeing the consequences of your actions throughout the story pay off in the end was satisfying and definitely had me excited to replay the game to see the differences. The last game on this list is, of course, Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. In the beginning of my review of the game, I said that KCD2 is now the benchmark for player choice and agency within a game, and I wholeheartedly stand by that statement. Every single quest in this game, whether it's a measly little activity or side quest, or if it's a full-blown main quest, had multiple ways for you to complete it with multiple endings depending on how you decide to complete it. On top of that, the characters, whether it be Hans Capon, Zizka, or Catherine, are incredibly written with meaningful dialogue and actions throughout the game. The story premise itself is amazing, with the complex political tug-of-war between the two brothers, King Wenceslas and King Sigismund. Everything about KCD2's story is really well done, and it absolutely serves as the benchmark for future games as the player choice and agency champion. A quick honorable mention before we go on to the next category is Mafia: The Old Country. Mafia: The Old Country, for all its faults, still has a pretty great story. Is it short? Absolutely. Are there annoying time skips where you don't get to see the characters develop? Yup. Is the overall story and characters still incredibly good? Also, absolutely. If they had increased the length of the story and then really fleshed out some of the characters' arcs a bit more, this would absolutely be one of the better stories and one of the better games in general I would have played this year. A couple of damn fun games that don't necessarily fit the bill of having a traditional story or a traditional world, but still are incredibly fun to play and absolutely worth checking out. Battlefield 6 is an incredible first-person shooter. I know the community is having problems with EA and DICE with some of the skins they've been selling and the more infantry-focused close-quarter maps, but the core Battlefield 6 experience is still so fun. The weapons, the return of the class system, the gorgeous graphics and sound design, and the incredible destruction really do make this game a treat to come back to time and time again. The other game, and the game that was subject of my most recent video, Arc Raiders. Arc Raiders to me is the best multiplayer experience to have come out in a long time. Battlefield 6 is amazing and fun, don't get me wrong, but I have not played something as addicting, immersive, and just straight up fun as Arc Raiders in a long time. For someone who grew up on multiplayer shooter games and then later transitioned into more traditional single player games, I felt that maybe I was getting too old for the multiplayer experience and that I wouldn't really have the ability to sink in hours at a time into a multiplayer game like I can single player ones. Arc Raiders proved to me that I still can, and in fact, I still want to, with just how fun the core gameplay loop is and how great the community surrounding the game is overall. Now, the challenge is finding the time to play Arc Raiders in between all the reviews of new games that I do for this channel. Now, it's time to give out the two big awards, Bust of the Year and Game of the Year. Starting with Bust of the Year, I think it's important to understand the distinction between what Bust of the Year is supposed to be and what many people make it out to be. Bust of the Year is about a game that had expectations going into it, but those expectations when the game released were simply put not met. This isn't about the game that was just the worst game of 2025. That would 10 out of 10 times go to a game like Mind's Eye, a game that was completely broken and finished and buggy at the start. But that isn't what Bust of the Year is about. Bust of the Year is about finding a game that had expectations and that didn't meet those expectations in a way that many people wanted it to be. With that criteria in mind, there were many ways I could go with this award. Call of Duty Black Ops 7 just came out, a game so creatively bankrupt that I would rather watch paint dry and have more fun doing it. But as I look back through the year, there was really only one game that jumped out at me as a game that I really had expectations for, but a game that really let me down. And that game is Avowed. Look, it's not that Avowed is bad or anything. I actually thought it was somewhat decent when I first played it, but knowing what I know now about what Obsidian is capable of in the same year with The Outer Worlds 2, it's crazy to me that Avowed was released by the same developer. I understand that it was two different teams working on each game and that chances are they didn't collaborate at all. However, fundamental design decisions like the incredibly static world and cities in Avowed, the lack of decent or meaningful choices, and gameplay that was severely hindered by the loot tier based progression are all significantly worse than the fundamental design decisions that had to be made for The Outer Worlds 2. It's crazy to me that in 1 year, Obsidian was able to release one of my favorite games of the year and one of the most disappointing games of the year for me as well. Now for the big one, Game of the Year. Now, like I mentioned in the beginning of this video, this was one of the best years in gaming in a while. And I truly do think there are multiple games on this list that could have won Game of the Year any other year, but because they came out this year, they didn't. But truly, this was a hard call, but I do think one game stood out above the rest. Whether it was the incredibly beautiful and lore deep world, the amazing turn-based gameplay, or, like I said, one of the best, if not the best stories I've ever experienced in a video game, Clair Obscur Expedition 33 absolutely won my Game of the Year. I know it's hard to believe the hype or have Expedition 33 live up to the hype when this game becomes the most awarded game ever at the Game Awards, but I truly do think this game deserves it. The fact that this is Sandfall Interactive's first game, the story they were able to tell, the world they were able to create, and the deep gameplay systems they were able to implement is a triumph. I cannot wait to see what they do next, but for now, I have to settle for saying Expedition 33 is one of my favorite games of all time. Either way, that's going to do it. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know down below your thoughts on my list. What do you agree with? What do you not agree with? What would you say is your Game of the Year or your Bust of the Year or the games that had the best world or the gameplay or the story? I'm excited to hear what y'all have to say in the comments. I'll definitely be down there replying. Again, if you like this type of content, make sure to hit that like button and please consider subscribing to see more content like this. Again, I truly could not thank you guys enough for 1,000 subscribers. Now it's on to bigger and better things. But yeah, guys, it's been CGG. I'm out.